When winter is at its coldest and the days feel so short, I always look out for the first signs of that winter is on its way out. Delicate snowdrops and vibrant crocuses, giving the promise of spring and letting you know we're going in the right direction. But the real harbinger of spring, bringing colour to the dreary British landscape, dandelions. So during 2020 and 21, I got into foraging in a big way. I've always liked the idea, and suddenly I found myself with a lot of time on my hands and not much else to do. Many pies were made during this time, and I started to look into what else can be easily foraged, and I was startled by how much you could do so in somewhere just like a public park. Plants I'd always just fobbed off as weeds can be used for all sorts. Thistles, nettles, plantain, yes, those scrappy little guys you see poking out through pavement slabs. And that includes our colourful friend, the dandelion. And that fact blew my tiny little brains. I was told as a child not only were they not edible, that the sap that they create was downright poisonous. But then I find out you can eat the whole dandelion. No, not the whole dandelion. Yes, the whole dandelion from tip to toe. And most people that I tell this to are also pretty surprised. So I thought, I'll do this video, I get to share this fact, and I get to indulge in my new hobby. Making different sorts of recipes, but showing how foraging can replace the major ingredients you'd normally have to buy from the shop. Maybe encourage people to give it a go? Then I had this idle thought just popped into my head of might even help people struggling with food costs. And then I realised what I'd be saying to people. You might have heard that Britain is a country in crisis. Unlike all the other times when she totally had her shit together. More people than ever are needing to use food banks to ensure they have something to eat. With the phrase heating or eating being used as a very real description for the choice people are having to make. That is shameful. And what am I saying to them? Just go out and eat weeds. How patronising to people's issues is that? What kind of bloodthirsty, backwards, Tory-esque, pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of doublethink is that? I suppose the silver lining is that in this time of scarcity, you're spoiled for choice when it comes to crises. And yes, I do know that food banks have been around in this country since the 60s, but they began becoming a mainstay of news broadcasts from the late 2000s, when we experienced the first once-in-a-lifetime financial crash of the century. Come on, gang, we've still got 76 more years. I think we can still fit a few more in there. I believe in us. But you know, prices go up. It's the way of it. And I'm not here to argue otherwise. It's just that I've yet to notice either mine or anyone else I know's pay packet managing to keep up with everything around us. And that includes food. According to numbers from the Trussell Trust, the amount of people using food banks between 08 and 09 was 25,899, and between 22 and 23 was Jesus Christ. Look, I could go into all the harrowing statistics about food poverty, but whenever I look at those numbers, each one representing my fellow human being, all I can think is, why isn't anything being done about it? We should be able to find a way to make sure people are being fed without the resources always having to come from charities. We should have somewhere in the halls of the Palace of Westminster someone who has a solution. Well, there was Lee Anderson, now known as 30p Lee, after claiming full meals can be made for 30p each. Oh, well, there you go. Food poverty sorted. Because in a very, 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 very technical way, he's right. You could make a meal for 30p. That meal would be pasta, just pasta for every meal forever, but it's doable. Then again, any savings you would make, you'd probably lose in toilet roll and laxatives. Or perhaps Teresa Coffee's solution of trading tomatoes for turnips. Not really taking into consideration the perhaps not well-known issue that tomatoes and turnips are different things. The Independent summarised this with the headline, "Let them eat turnips." A recognisable reference to that infamous historical quote associated with the upper classes' disdain and apathy to the issue of the public, literally not having food. Oh, so you're saying Marie Antoinette never actually said that phrase? Oh wow, that's so interesting. Please tell me more. The point is that this is the norm we live in, where the people who actually have influence and power to change things don't. And their only suggestions are that the people who are most vulnerable to these problems have to help themselves. And if these two intellectual powerhouses can't figure it out, what chance do us plebs have? People are budgeting as much as they possibly can. Belts have been tightened so much that even Mila Nurmi would look at them and go, "Ooh, that's tight." And there's never any reward for all this thrifting and saving, is there? Once the public shows that it can limit its means just that little bit more, well, that's just the average, isn't it? These things are always ratcheted up, never back down. So I didn't want to add to that tactic, intentionally or not, by saying that foraging weeds was going to solve the national food crisis. So that's where my privileged person's moral paralysis came from. The thing is, though, me feeling a bit bad about it isn't going to make anybody's belly fuller. So there's really no better time to learn this skill, and gods do I pray that there won't be a worse time. So I just want to share my foraging experiences and the meals that I was able to make out of plants that you can find in any typical park, countryside area, or hedgerow by the M25. It started off with the easiest thing, berries. Specifically blackberries. You can find these growing pretty much anywhere in the UK. Then I looked further and I found all of these weeds that can double as ingredients. Dandelions, plantain, nettles, sticky weed, daisies, thistles, dock leaves. And this was all incredible to me. I mean, finding out all these uses of these plants that I normally just walk past. But it would be wrong of me not to mention there's always a flip side. It's nice to live with nature. Partake of the bounty. Just remember that Mother Nature is much bigger than us and she can beat us up if she wants to. That's true even for something that seems as straightforward as foraging. There are lots of things out there that can hurt you if you're not prepared. For example, yarrow. A common plant you'll see everywhere with all types of uses from recipes to medicines. Unfortunately, it has a more than passing resemblance to hemlock, which you might guess by the name is not very good for you. You can identify the two if you know what to look for. You could figure out the difference, but since that difference is between ingredients for a tasty broth and death by paralysis, not worth it. Not worth it. Also, I would like to share my personal rule when foraging. I don't fuck with mushrooms. There is goddamn too many of them, and for some of them, there is like a sliver of daylight between the ones you can eat and the ones that are going to take you on a magical mystery tour. Or just straight up kill you. I do not with mushrooms. And this isn't to say like, oh, look at me, aren't I clever? I'm so self-sufficient. I'm like Barbara and Tom out the good life. No. This part of the video is to hopefully ease any trepidation other people might have about trying out foraging for the first time. If someone like me can learn about these things, anyone can. Now, if I might just put my tinfoil hat on for a moment, I promise I'm going somewhere with this, I want to indulge in a little bit of conspiratorial thinking. Why don't we teach this to kids? It would be a great skill for them to know, even if it's just to keep them safe from more dangerous plants. Not worth it. But now this lost talent that was once more commonplace is now considered a hobby, causing people to become more and more reliant on supermarkets. Which just proves my theory that the UK education system is in the pocket of big Tesco's. Now, all of that was a joke, except for the part where we should be teaching kids foraging. Like, replace cursive with foraging. Throw cursive out, bring in foraging. As more and more ways to preserve perishables became available, there's just less reason to know these things. No conspiracy here. Except, well, not a conspiracy, but an interesting fact I found was that dandelion leaves are more nutritious than spinach or kale. And this is going to sound odd, but that made me sad. Even though you can purchase dandelions if you want to, I don't think we'll ever be seeing them being touted as the new big superfood health craze. I don't see Lorraine Kelly doing a big segment on them because, well, we can all get them for free. And how do you market that? And because of this, people miss out on a healthy and helpful food source because if anyone can have it, who's really going to want it? And I hate that we live in that world. Once I started down this path, even with my own limited research, I started to look at nature around me differently. Granted, my first thought will often be, oh, that's very interesting. Can I eat it? But I also started to notice little changes in seasons more acutely, learning about the life cycles of plants and trees and bushes, finding out their names and their origins, making sure that I'm taking part in that cycle, not disturbing it, never taking more than I know that I need, and making sure that I leave something for the pollinators. The bees, the butterflies, and yes, even the much maligned wasps. That isn't to say that foraging doesn't have its failings. You can't live off of foraging alone. Even if you do live somewhere with a bit of grass, doesn't mean that you're living somewhere that's going to provide anything. And even if you can, you might have limitations on what you can do. Foraging lends itself to a certain body type. I'm able-bodied, which means I can get places that other people might struggle to reach, and I can be there for a longer period of time. Public parks and woodlands can say that they're going to make the area more accessible to everyone. And some do, but some don't. And some just can't. Something I could suggest is maybe talk to your friends, ask them to join in. And then enjoying a day out of foraging together and sharing tips, know-how, good foraging spots, and then sharing what you've collected. It's a really nice hobby to share with your friends. And if it helps, it helps. I mean, it's free. You can just take it. Nobody can stop you. Maybe some of the things I've said invoke the image of hippy-dippy, live off the land, tree-hugging nonsense. I'm not about to say, hey, quit the rat race and come join me on my compound. I mean, mostly because, who can afford a compound in this economy? Come on. But also, if we're not going to get any help from the people who actually have any ability to help people, what's the harm in helping each other? It doesn't matter who said the let them eat cake line, when it doesn't change the fact that the people ain't got no bread. Because going back to the more uncomfortable facts about foraging, even if you've got everything in your corner, you live near a forest, it has all of the edible vegetation, and you have the mobility to forage to your heart's content. You shouldn't have to. I honestly don't know how I'm meant to finish up this video. Foraging is not a solution to this problem, and I really don't know what the solid, sustainable solution is. But it is past the point of asking nicely. If we want this to change, we have to demand it to change. Demand more from our government, no matter who they are. Make them make us a priority. stand across the road from the House of Commons, hold a boombox over your head and blast out some Twisted Sister, you know, before they wrestle the right to be awesome away from us as well. Because something became bitterly obvious to me whilst I was working on this video. People aren't relying on food banks. These lot are.